This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and I'm with Joss Bigmore, leader of Guildford Borough Council. Thank you for joining the Guildford Dragon, Joss.
No, but always my pleasure, Martin. Happy New Year to you.
And to you. And I always like to get straight into these things because I know time is pressing for everybody. So first of all, I'd like to ask you about the wait times that residents are having to endure when they try and contact the council. Now, there have been a lot of complaints about that. What is the current performance that you're aware of?
Well, firstly, I'd like to apologise for the inconsistent service we've been able to provide through the customer centre. There are many reasons. I think anyone who's had any experience with call centres for any company in the past 3 months has realised that service across the board has been challenged with, a lot more demands on the service, and also staff shortages, whether it's through isolation or just difficult to hire. I mean, we have a planned team of 15 in the customer service centre. We have 5 open vacancies, and we are really struggling to hire. And that's something that is across the authority. We have 5 open positions of enforcement officers for parking, planning. It's just really hard to find staff at the moment. So we are operating with a reduced team that we're actively trying to deal with. But it's clear that the volume of calls at the moment, we do not have the capacity to be able to deliver the service we want to do. It is not just the fault of the customer service and the operatives that are answering the phones. It requires all of the services to also be able to handle the requests as they are triaged to the businesses. So it's kind of the whole authority is struggling under the weight of the demand. So we're currently getting about 850 calls a day, which is about 20% higher than the pre-pandemic level. Average wait times before being answered is 6 minutes, although 51% of calls are being picked up within 20 seconds. So that's what I mean about the inconsistency. You can get very lucky, or you can be on the calls a long while. And unfortunately, we're only answering 44% of overall calls. So 51% of that 44% are being answered within 20 seconds. So, we have a long way to go to improve the service. There are a couple of things we're looking at the moment.
Sorry, just let me jump in there. I just want to get clear on those stats. So could you just run through them again? 6 minutes, did you mention?
The average call wait times is 6 minutes, 20 seconds. This is for the week. This is for the week ending Friday, the 14th of Jan. So last week. Okay. And
that 6 minutes is from when to when? From when someone gets through to the number, or
yeah.
To when?
Yeah, exactly.
To what?
From ringing to when it is picked up.
Okay, but when it's picked up, it's normally just a tape message.
Yes, to then get you where you need to go, and there is that the automatic call routing is something that is continually evolving. So there is a new options menu that has just gone live that should help get people through that automated section far quicker.
Okay, I mean, I know the problem the council has, because obviously to hire someone, not only you've got to be able to hire them, as you just alluded to, but also it's more expensive than having a tape deck there with answering. But of course, from the caller's point of view, it can be very frustrating because you have to listen to a long message before you get to what you want to do, and that, in my personal experience, only raises my blood pressure while I'm having to listen to all this. And then by the time you get to speak to someone, you can be already quite annoyed. But there are alternative ways. But wouldn't someone suggested to me, and I don't know how feasible it would be, couldn't you set up a volunteer section to man the phones?
I think that's difficult in that you're dealing with sometimes quite sensitive information with some of the requests that come through.
I only meant really to direct the calls.
I don't know. One thing we are piloting this week, and it's the second day today, is a callback system where you can request a callback rather than sitting on hold. Now that I think should alleviate the frustration of just sitting there with your hand on the phone. So it will require some tweaks, I'm sure, but that should be a really positive benefit. But to be clear, we are very aware of this, and the team are very aware of it, and we are very open to to all of the criticism, and we will try and get better, because it is not where we need to be.
Okay. I mean, in my experience, there is a lot of community spirit in Guildford, and it may be that if the council appeal for volunteers, people would be happy to do that. But
I think as well,
I know
we have
these
to be.
things aren't as simple as you would like them to think.
No, I mean that you're dealing with, as I said, sometimes quite sensitive issues, and not having a trained officer.
I didn't envisage them dealing with the nitty gritty of just simply someone says, I need to speak to the housing department or whatever, and they say, right, we'll put you through.
I think as well, we are obviously very keen for people to switch to the online and My Guildford accounts, and I think 20,000 households already have, which is kind of double our estimate for the initial year. But also cognizant that is not for everybody. So we need to have a functioning phone service. We need to always have a reception where people can actually physically go and see someone. And I think that's to reassure residents, that they will always be there. We will get better on the phones. And we will be better as an authority dealing with those, whilst promoting the kind of digital platform, and we will always have a manned reception, well, pandemic allowing.
What is your target wait time for the phones?
Well, I would like 80% of calls, I think, answered within 20 seconds. That's the gold standard, I think, the metric. But as I said, these kind of the performance, the council's never really had an established performance management framework across all the services. So there's a lot at the moment tweaking about what are the real metrics that really define performance, and what should be the target, and how should that target change over time. And I think that's something we publish every quarter through the corporate governance and standards committee. So they will look and interrogate the performance management framework. But this is, I think, probably the third quarter we've done it. And at the moment, there's a few in there that we'll just put them in because we can measure them, and they don't actually mean a lot. So I think, we need to work as a council, and residents need to tell us what does good look like for the service centre, and what are the key metrics. And obviously speaking to somebody as quickly as possible is that metric.
Yeah. So you have to find a target there, 80% within 20 seconds. When would you hope to achieve that target by?
Well, I mean, that's very dependent on hiring. If we can get the team up, if we can get the team hired and trained as quickly as possible, then it can happen quite quickly. But, at the moment, we have an incredibly tight labour market. It seems like inflation and wage inflation is getting increasingly out of control. The local authority hasn't got the same flexibility in pay policy as the private sector to attract people. So it's tough across our authority, and it's not just Guildford. I mean, it's across the board. We're all competing for the same planners, the same enforcement. There's the same buildings inspectors. It's, and as are the private sector, and we need to. The labour market is incredibly tight, and the government kind of needs to listen. And I know politically it's very difficult for them to open the immigration taps. But we need staff, and we need workers. Okay,
but will you ask your officers about the feasibility of volunteer?
Yes, I will. Councillor John Redpath is newly, because I was doing such a bad job. We've decided he's going to task customer service. So I mean, we were far better at the end of the summer. In terms of the metrics around customer service, but this is the kind of latest wave, and lost a few staff and a bit of isolation. We now need to improve again, and Councillor Redpath has been tasked with that. So maybe as a future interview, you could speak to him about it.
Okay, thank you. Now, toilet closures, another subject that can cause frustration. Judging by the reaction, a lot of people are very disappointed with the council's decision on this, and it's not going to save a great deal. Are you still intent with going forward with this?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you can take every single element of the spending review and challenge it, but taken as a package, they get us to where we need to be, which is a balanced budget. Now, I can understand none of these decisions are popular. There's a small cut to the Citizen Advice Bureau grant. you know, a potential small cut to the Even Arno. We're talking about consolidating elderly services. These are all really difficult, horrible decisions to have to take. But, you know, we have a significant budget issue. You know, council tax, just to remind everybody, the borough council gets 9% of the council tax. That is less than £200 per bandee home. Legally, we can only raise that by £5. That raises 300 grand extra a year. So, you know, I think in the latest budget papers, the kind of pay claim from the union over the next 3 years is 10%. Now, bear in mind, we did not give any council officers a pay rise last year because of the budget issue, and they have worked phenomenally hard, you know, a significant majority of them. So that is not unreasonable. A 3% pay rise for the staff is nearly £1 million.
Okay.
So you just look at the math, and it's like, hang on a minute, we can only get an extra 300 grand from council tax. So we need.
I understand that you know there are lots of challenges to the council, but let's get back to the toilets. Have you considered actually letting the private sector in to run them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's you know the case that parish councils may take them over. There's you know the toilet near the cafe on Woodbridge Road. Maybe the cafe would like to. Obviously, these discussions are going to be had, but we need to make the decisions about the closure before we can talk about the, you know. But you know what I will say is you know we spent quite a bit of money getting a professional survey company to do a representative survey of the borough. So they did a phone consultation with nearly 1,500 residents at the start of last year, saying what should the priorities of the council be across all these discretionary services. And public conveniences came 9th out of 12 when you look at importance, priority, and spending. So I appreciate there isn't, you know, this is going to impact some people negatively. I fully accept that. It's a horrible decision to have to take. However, when we've gone out and surveyed the whole borough, you know, this was not a priority when you look at the other priorities of the council. So, you know, there is another argument on, you know, on the flip side. And if we don't save 65 grand here, where am I going to find it? Do I take it from the Citizens Advice Bureau or the Even Arno? You know, it has to come from somewhere. We are not in the position where we're not central government. We cannot borrow to fund the deficit. We have to balance the books.
And you understandably continue to make that point. But of course, because something is 9th in a list of 12, it doesn't mean to say it's not important. Because actually,
no, I agree, Martin, which is why 12 of the public conveniences will be staying open. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's you know, and one of the other issues with, and you know, to be clear, government is in a very difficult position. Surrey County Council is. This is not a political thing. There is not a lot of money in government at the moment, you know, but we keep getting 1-year funding deals from central government, which makes business planning a nightmare. So we get a deal in December and we have to pass a budget in February. So I don't know what I'm going to get from central government next year. So I always have to be prudent and keep something. And I say Guildford Borough Council has to be prudent and keep something in the back pocket just in case there's another wave or something.
Okay, but so also what you said there, I think, is that once you've selected the toilets that need to close for you to balance the budget, you will still be open to negotiation of other solutions.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, now let's move on to Debenhams and St Mary's Wharf. The town seems, if our very small sample is indicative and the letters pages are indicative, the town is split over this. You know, that I don't know if it's 50-50, but there are certainly there's certainly a considerable number of people that are worried about especially about the height of the new development, and others that think, well, let's not leave it as a derelict site. And you know, I think, you know, you can see both points of view really, but isn't there any way of squaring this circle? I mean, isn't the basic problem that if you have this viability test with everything, then you're always going to be forced to have higher and higher buildings in Guildford? Wouldn't an answer be to have a height policy which might drive down the value of the policy and then of the site, and then allow less height on buildings?
Well, I think, you know, the Debenhams build is very complex because of its location and it's in the flood zone. So, you know, the viability is done independently of Guildford Borough Council. Obviously the developer will get his viability assessment done, and then we'll have an external professional, critique it and challenge
I
it.
don't think
Sorry,
I'm not sure. Perhaps I haven't explained it very well. If there was a policy in Guildford that no building could be higher than, say, 5 stories, just plucking it out, right? That would then maybe set the value of a site.
So you're talking about depressing land value across Guildford through a height policy. I think, unfortunately, my opinion, that ship has sailed. So Solent, for instance, hate the appeal decision, but if you look at the appeal decision from the planning inspector, he is determined that that 8 or 9 story building does not constitute planning harm. So how can we then say we want a 5 limit when a planning inspector has said, well, actually, you've got 9 here and it's not harmful? How can we then get a limit of 5 through a planning inspector as a DMP policy? It's just inconsistent. So I don't think you can do that. I also think that if you have an arbitrary level, planning is about harm. You can have a 2-story building that's horrendous, and you need to give decision makers, be it officers or the planning committee, discretion. So, a 2-story building can be absolutely horrific. A 10-story building can be beautiful. If you have an arbitrary height, the 2-story building gets approved and the 10-story doesn't. So I think there's a flip side to this argument. And I think, other areas that have tried a hard limit, suddenly that becomes the floor and everything is that height, because by definition, anything up to that height is not harmful, which is nonsense. So, I think, 2 reasons. One, I think it's better to give decision makers discretion because some low buildings don't deserve planning permission, and the ship sailed. We already have multiple buildings over 8 stories. And I think it's very difficult to argue with a planning inspector to get a policy through that is, that you've already got buildings and planning inspectors that think they don't constitute harm.
Okay, but you would have seen the letter from Historic England. Yeah. I mean, they are very concerned about the impact on.
I mean, you said your readership is split, and I think that's fair from what I've read. I think the council chamber is probably split, and I think R4GB probably is as well. I'm not on the planning committee, so I kind of speak a bit more freely. For me, yes, at the margin, it's a little bit high. I quite like the design, and I think there's a lot of public benefit. So I would probably prefer it to be a couple of stories lower, but I think it's an opportunity and a big investment in Guildford, and it can bring a lot of good. But that's not to say we need to accept absolutely everything the developer wants. And I think Historic England have put in a pretty strong objection, and that probably means the developer's got to go away and think again how he's going to deal with that objection.
But could a 12-story building in the town centre ever be the right thing in Guildford?
I can't answer that question unless I see the plan and the application.
Okay.
I mean, I would say of the councillors, I am far more open-minded to heights, to modern buildings. I think Guildford has got so many different styles. It's so eclectic in its styles in different parts that it's difficult to define a character or this across it. And there are some areas I think could probably handle 12 stories. There are others that absolutely cannot, that could barely handle 3. And I think until you see an individual application, I'm not going to have a blanket ban on anything.
But there is a topography. Guildford is a gap town.
Yeah.
There is a topography which could easily be masked by tall buildings.
It can, and that's why the supplementary planning document on heights and views defines, I think it's 20 viewing corridors of key views around Guildford that we must protect. So we've kind of, rather than define height, we've tried to say, actually, what we're trying to protect is this view of the cathedral or this view of St Saviour's. So we've tried to do it in terms of defining the harm or the beauty we're trying to protect, or the harm that could be caused, rather than an arbitrary limit on height.
Okay, right. Let's move on to a celebration, the Queen's Jubilee in June, and
Guildford gets city status. That's the first celebration. Although I know your readership is very 50-50 on that as well.
Yes, it is. But so who's going to be lighting the beacon? The council's now confirmed that we are going to be lighting our beacon. So who's going to be doing that? Do we know yet?
I don't know, Martin. I should imagine we will discuss with the Lord Lieutenant. you know, who would be appropriate. It's a civic occasion, so the mayoralty, you know, would if it was going to be to do with the council, you know, my own preference, you know, maybe a member of the community, you know, who we wish to nominate. You know, I think it's a, you know, it's, you know, there are obviously figureheads that could do it, but I'm always quite keen to bring the community into these things.
Maybe someone that's of a similar age, that's lived through, you know, lived the
Yes. Yeah.
Or
I mean,
born in 1952 at the time of the.
You're not that old, are you?
No, not quite. Not quite. Nearly. But no, I wasn't volunteering myself. But that could be an idea, couldn't it?
Yeah.
No, but
I think we should, you know, with a county town, and maybe, you know, as jokingly, maybe a city, but I think, you know, we do things properly, like, you know, the remembrance celebrations every year and this, and we will mark the Jubilee properly in Guildford. I think, you know, we're actually kicking off this month. There's the Queen's doing a green canopy initiative to plant trees for a Jubilee. So our mayor Marcia is kind of launching that on the 26th with a tree planting ceremony in Stoke Park Gardens.
Okay.
We're encouraging street parties. We're going to waive all the fees if you want to have a street party, and give some, you know, tips and advice on how you do that. Obviously, all our buildings will be lit up. The flags will be flying everywhere. You know, there'll be a lot going on. I'm looking forward to it.
So officers are busy working on this plan, and we should watch this space. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, we'll obviously need to coordinate with the other boroughs and districts, with the, as I said, with the Lord Lieutenant. We need to make sure everything's coordinated, and there's a, you know, there's the, you know, I mean, you know, the Queen is an example to anyone in public service, outstanding, and I think you know, this Jubilee deserves to be marked, and the country show our respect and appreciation for Her Majesty.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Now, the local plan and the review. What's the timetable now? I mean, isn't it just going to fall into the mandatory review anyway?
Well, I think you know, council passed a motion to go and get some independent advice. We have around the local plan review, potential tactics, risks, rewards. We have received the draft of that advice that's being fact checked now, and then that will have to be reported back to council in kind of Q1 this year. Well, maybe April, depending there. So then there will be, you know, the council will then, you know, outline its strategy for handling the review and a potential update. Because as I keep saying, a review doesn't achieve anything. A review, you want an update, which will change the direction of the plan. So, you know, it's a two-stage process. And yes, there is you know, we have to do a statutory review in 5 years, you know, but that doesn't really achieve anything in itself unless you're going to update the plan.
Okay, so the review has to be completed by 5 years or started?
But there's no definition of what a review can be. We can literally say we've reviewed the plan and it's working fine, full stop. You know, that you know, I'm not
right. Okay, well, that's it. So, but if you change it, then it's who's got to check that the changes are acceptable?
No, it has to go through a full public examination. And this is where the sword of Damocles is there, because, you know, under the current planning policy, national policy, the standard methodology of housing need indicates an increase in housing requirement from Guildford on top of the 560 homes we're delivering at the moment. Okay. So there is a risk, and I'm not saying, you know, there's a lot of people challenging the ONS data and saying this, but the government is pretty steadfast. They want 300,000 homes. So if the ONS numbers change, they may just change the formula and still come up with the same number. But you know, there is a risk that we can go into an update and end up having to find more sites for more homes than we have at the moment. And unless we can show that we can deliver those homes in the urban areas on brownfield, it could result in more greenbelt. And that's not something we want to do. So this is not, as I keep saying, this is not a risk-free process, but we are determined to do what we can, you know, for you know, to get a plan that's more in line with what we think the residents want. Okay.
But if you say we've reviewed the plan and we don't need to change it, could that be second guessed?
Well, no, because I mean, unfortunately, because the standard methodology now says Guildford needs 787, developers can come and say, well, actually, you do need to update your plan because you're not meeting housing need.
So there's no risk-free. There's no risk-free option.
No.
So whatever's going to happen, there's a
well,
risk.
I mean, no, because I mean, you know, again, and you can. I'm sitting here with a blue background, so I'm quite conscious. You shouldn't be talking about Boris Johnson, but you know, he keeps saying there'll be no further building on Greenbelt. So let's wait and see when the new planning white paper comes out to see if the actual legislation matches the words. Well, I mean, I think we're all skeptical.
And whether it's Boris Johnson that's saying them as well. But we just, it seems to me there's a hell of a lot of uncertainty there.
There is, and if you make the wrong move, which is why, you know, I fully understand everyone's impatience with this, but you know, this is not without significant risk if we get this wrong. And, you know, I don't want to be a leader of the council where I'm suddenly going to, you know, the Horsleys or Ripley saying, actually, all those Greenbelt sites that got taken out of the last inspection, we now need to put back in because we've misjudged the timing of a local plan review or update.
No, I mean, well, people in Horsley are already completely fed up with what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, and I have every empathy with them, but it's completely predictable. It was what was planned in the local plan that the first year's, you know, delivery was all going to be in previously Greenbelt villages, but, you know, and ash, because they're the ones that were going to come forward far quicker than the strategic sites. So, you know, it was entirely predictable. But it's really upsetting.
Do you regret now? I mean, it seemed to me, and perhaps I misread it, that Jan Harwood, before he moved to the Conservatives, was the main proponent of stating the risk of an early review. So do you regret taking his advice, or do you think that his advice was correct?
Which advice did I take?
Well, that it was high risk to push through a review quickly.
Well, I mean, you know, as with everything this is a high stakes game. So, you know, I'm not going to take anyone's opinion over anything. I don't think we had enough information. And I think, you know, this latest piece of independent advice will be more information where we can actually at least narrow down the probabilities of the various outcomes and the various ways we can attack this. And I think we just need to be very rational and calm, because I mean, there's an enormous amount of emotion, and I fully understand that. But as I said, you know, we need to tread very carefully, or we could end up being in a worse position. And it's one of those things. It all boils down to the fact the plan is adopted a week before the election, and suddenly, you know, maybe naivety on you know, certainly my part. You know, when they say, you know, planning's in the control of the local people, it's not, because trying to unpick this local plan, it having been adopted, you know, is it a Gordian knot that keeps getting more complicated as you try and unravel it? That's kind of where we are at the moment.
Well, I don't know if it got more complicated. It just had to be cut with a sword, I think. But anyway, right. Let's move on to the handover of the leadership.
Martin, sorry, I'm actually a little late for a meeting. Sorry, it's fine. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay. Well, this is the last question. Yeah. You've got the handover of the leadership back to the Lib Dems in October. So what's given they've had that change of deputy leader at the council? It's now Julia McShane. So what are you anticipating? Are you preparing? Are you talking to them about that, etc.? What's happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Lib Dems have they have an AGM, I think every kind of May time, when they re-elect their kind of officers. So we obviously, you know, pre-Jan's move, he was deputy leader of the council, but Julia McShane was group leader. Now Julia's group leader and deputy leader of the council. So, I mean, as things stand, my assumption would be she would become leader when I stand down. But I think she has to go through a re-election period at their AGM. So I'm not party to those inner workings. You know, I kind of hark back to Jan's interview and George's, where Jan was pretty confident he was going to be the next leader of the council, and George Potter was like he was going to be the last person that was going to be leader of the council. Okay. So I don't want to assume anything, but you know, as things stand, we have an agreement, and I will not break that agreement. You know, I will stand down in September, unless the Lib Dems say they don't want it, which I think is probably unlikely.
Do you anticipate any significant changes of direction once that happens?
Well, I mean, apart from the fact of being a massive step down in quality of leader, because no, all joking aside, if it's Julia, she'll do a fantastic job. We're a pretty tight team across the 8 of us, and we have a very complementary skill sets. We obviously have our disagreements, but it works pretty well. So I can't imagine on any of the big things there'll be a significant change in direction.
Okay. Joss Bigmore, you've got a meeting to go to and somewhere else, to be very modest. So I'll let you go and say thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Martin. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.